we've been talking about this in the news, but US lawmakers are racing they're right down to the wire to avoid another government shutdown. I mean, we've talked about this lots of times before, haven't we? And people will be asking, why does this keep happening?
Well, it's because both political parties tend to use the issue of government funding as leverage to get what they want in other areas. Since 1981, there have been 14 partial government shutdowns under both Democratic and Republican presidents. There have been even more threatened shutdowns, ones that were avoided at the 11th hour, as we seem to be heading towards today. The longest shutdown was at the end of 2018. It lasted 35 days and cost around $11 billion. Now, the Senate has now approved that stopgap measure, which would fund the government until December. The House is expected to follow suit shortly. It is, though, just temporary, and the threat could re-emerge again just 2 months down the road. Well, slightly less immediate, but far more far-reaching is the issue of America's debt ceiling, or the government borrowing limit. A 2-year suspension of that borrowing limit ended in August, when it was set at $28.4 trillion. The national debt continued to rise because the U.S. spends more than it takes in, and so the debt load is now bigger than that authorized ceiling. Just to give you a comparison, it's bigger than the total value of America's economy last year. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen earlier this week said the U.S. government would run out of money by October the 18th. Democrats had been trying to tie raising the debt ceiling into that wider funding debate. Failure to raise the debt ceiling would mean America defaulting on its debts, like payments on Treasury bonds. That has never happened before, and it would have wide-ranging consequences for both the U.S. and global economy.
What I said last week was
the full faith and credit of the United States would be impaired, and our country would likely face a financial crisis and economic recession as a result. We must address this issue to honor commitments made by this and prior Congresses, including those made to address the health and economic impact of the pandemic. It's necessary to avert a catastrophic event for our economy.
Janet Yellen speaking earlier this week. Well, meanwhile, the number of Americans applying for jobless benefits rose again for a third consecutive week. 362,000 new claims were filed across the country last week. Analysts say it's a sign that the ongoing spread of the Delta variant of COVID-19 is affecting hiring. The number of overall people receiving some kind of jobless support, meanwhile, continued to drop to 11.25 million as the more generous pandemic benefits begin to run out. Separate data showed the U.S. economy expanded at an annual pace of 6.7% from April to June. That's slightly higher than the 6.6% initially recorded.